One Piece is easily one of the biggest and most influential anime/manga franchises in history, and when you dive into its epic story and become familiar with its endearing cast of characters, it's easy to see why the series became such a juggernaut and how it's been able to enjoy such longevity. One Piece is a series driven by a sense of adventure, and it's filled with some of the most thrilling fight scenes in all of anime, so it feels like a franchise that should be perfect for video game adaptations. So you'd think by now we would have had a lot of slam dunks. But like a lot of anime franchises, when it comes to One Piece's video game adaptations, the quality has been all over the place. While there have been a handful of moderately well-received One Piece games, like the Pirate Warriors franchise and Unlimited World Red, we've also received a ridiculous amount of middling to bad games like World Seeker, Romance Dawn, and Grand Cruise. But since it was announced, I thought One Piece Odyssey had the potential to be the first truly great One Piece game, because on paper, it's basically my dream One Piece game, as Odyssey is a turn-based JRPG. I love JRPGs, and I've always found it strange that we don't get more JRPGs based on anime series. There's a ton of anime that would work perfectly within the genre, but the licensed anime game market is largely flooded with Musous and 3D arena fighters. And while One Piece Odyssey's fun battle system and striking art style make it a cut above your average licensed anime game, its monotonous backtracking, lack of challenge, and cliched story prevent Odyssey from ever reaching the heights that I wanted it to. Unlike many of the prior One Piece games, Odyssey doesn't aim to retell the story of the anime, instead opting to tell its own original story within the universe, though it does still manage to find an excuse to let you revisit some of the series' most iconic locations and story moments. This is probably the right way to tackle making a One Piece game, as it would be impossible to cram the gargantuan story of One Piece into a single game. Hell, it'd probably be impossible to retell it in a trilogy of games. We are, after all, talking about a manga that's almost 1,200 chapters deep. Unfortunately, the overarching story Odyssey has to tell just isn't that compelling. It's not awful, but it is very simple and formulaic. Odyssey also uses some very tired and sloppy plot devices, the most immediately glaring of which is the way Odyssey depowers the Straw Hat Pirates. I understand why they had to do this. At the point where Odyssey takes place, Luffy and his crew have been honing their skills for years, and they're all extremely powerful. But with this being a JRPG, you don't want your party to be too powerful from the jump. After all, one of the most satisfying aspects of playing an RPG is leveling up your party and seeing their abilities grow and evolve over time. If your characters are too powerful right off the bat, then there's no sense of progression. So this was always something that Odyssey was going to have to address, and that's inevitably going to be a tricky thing to contend with. But the way Odyssey's story handles this feels exceptionally sloppy. Early on in Odyssey, you're introduced to a duo of original characters created for this game, Adio and Lim, and these two serve as Odyssey's main supporting characters. Lim has a power that allows her to steal the abilities of others when she touches them, transforming their powers into cubes for whatever reason. As you'd expect, she immediately steals the Straw Hats' powers, and the cubes that contain their abilities are scattered, leaving the Straw Hats on a quest to find these cubes and regain their strength. This kind of MacGuffin is always going to feel schlocky, but the way One Piece Odyssey handles it feels especially clumsy. While Odyssey isn't a direct retelling of the anime, the story does see you reliving some of the series' most memorable moments, and Lim is directly responsible for these segments of the game as well. Lim has the ability to take the Straw Hats to a dimension called Memoria, where they can relive their past experiences, and this is partially how they're able to regain their powers. Having characters enter a metaphysical universe where they can revisit their memories is also an incredibly trite storytelling device, but I found it an easier pill to swallow than the ability cubes, because even if I didn't like how we got there, I did want to experience these moments and locations in-game, and the segments in Memoria are easily the most interesting parts of One Piece Odyssey, so it's fortunate that they make up a large percentage of the game's runtime. I really enjoyed revisiting locations like Alabaster and Water 7 and encountering all the friends and foes that the Straw Hats met during these arcs. Just don't expect to see too many locations from the anime. You'll only be visiting a handful of them, as Odyssey very much jumps around to a handful of major story arcs that it wants to play with. I know some players will decry the lack of locations like Skypiea, but with a series as big as One Piece, you have to draw the line at some point, and I think the developers have largely chosen the right moments to recreate in-game. They've clearly chosen locations like Alabaster, Water 7 and Marineford, as they have some of One Piece's most memorable and emotionally impactful moments, and Odyssey does a fantastic job of recreating these scenes. While the Straw Hat crew are as lovable as ever in Odyssey, I found myself underwhelmed with the new characters. I didn't hate them, but they're not particularly memorable either. Adio's initial introduction is interesting, but his overall story arc feels paper thin, and while I actually quite like Lim as a character, it's clear that she only exists as a plot device to depower the Straw Hats and take them to familiar locations, which is unfortunate. Ultimately, the story of Odyssey is just so safe and by the numbers that it never feels like there are any stakes. The story just trucks along with every plot beat unfolding exactly how you expect it to. While the story of Odyssey is disappointing, its combat mechanics are largely very good. And if you're a JRPG fan, you'll feel right at home with Odyssey's turn-based combat. Odyssey's combat is focused around a rock, paper, scissors style mechanic, where each party member and enemy in the game falls into one of three archetypes that gives them an advantage over certain opponents and makes them more vulnerable to others. The three classes of character are power, speed and technique. Power beats speed, speed beats technique, and technique beats power. While this approach to combat is nothing new for RPGs, and fits a similar mould to Fire Emblem's weapon triangle, or even Pokemon's battle system, it's still enjoyable nonetheless. Different members of the Straw Hat Pirates fill your typical JRPG party roles. For example, Luffy is a versatile all-rounder who has a good variety of both close range and long range attacks, while the crew's Dr. Chopper of course serves as your party's main healer, though he's also got some of the most useful offensive attacks in Odyssey as well. By using your party's basic attacks, your characters generate TP, the energy they use to perform special attacks. Seeing all the techniques that you've seen in the anime brought to life in-game is awesome. These attacks are beautifully animated, and there's a huge amount of spectacle when you see Nami call down lightning and strike 8 enemies at once, Luffy leap into the air and pound down his opponents with a barrage of punches, or Robin summon a giant pair of legs and stomp out an entire group of enemies. Certain special attacks also have the potential to inflict a status effect that deals damage over time. For example, Zoro's swords can inflict bleed damage, while Sanji's flaming kicks can leave enemies burnt. Some party members even have abilities that let them transform into a more powerful form, allowing Luffy to enter Gear 2, or letting Chopper transform into his monster form. Chopper even has an extremely powerful special attack that he can only perform when he's in his monster form. As cool as they are, you're going to be using each character's special attacks dozens, if not hundreds of times, and they do start to lose their luster once you've seen them too many times. Thankfully, Odyssey has some great quality of life features, one of which provides a solution for this very problem. Odyssey has a fast forward button that speeds up battle animations so you don't have to sit through the same cinematics over and over again. But the quality of life features don't stop there. When you're equipping different accessories to buff your stats, there's an option in the menu to just have the game automatically equip characters with recommended accessories for different playstyles, which drastically cuts down the amount of time spent on micromanagement. There's also no random battles in Odyssey. All enemies can be seen wandering around the map, and you simply run into them to instigate a fight. If you sneak up on an enemy from behind, you'll start the battle with a stat buff, and conversely, if an enemy initiates the fight by running into your back, you'll start the battle at a disadvantage. One of the best aspects of Odyssey's battle system is that it lets you swap party members in and out whenever you want, even mid-battle, meaning you'll always be able to ensure your party is composed of the best possible team members for any given fight. And you can even swap the positions of your party members on the map with one another, so they're always paired up against enemies that are weak to their character type. Odyssey has a good amount of enemy variety, and many of the enemies have wonderfully absurd designs that go a long way to keep battles interesting throughout, even if there are also a lot of palette swap enemies. Sometimes in the middle of a battle, you'll get an optional challenge requiring you to do something like defeating an enemy with a specific character, healing an ally before they get knocked out, or finishing off an opponent before they can launch a powerful attack. And if you complete these challenges, you'll be given some bonus experience points at the end of the battle. As you'd probably guess, you don't have all the Straw Hat Pirates in your crew from the jump, with certain characters joining the party over time. This allows you to fully explore each character's moveset, and prevents characters from being in memories that they shouldn't be in when the crew enters Memoria. For example, Frankie and Brooke hadn't been introduced yet when the Alabaster arc takes place, so they aren't present during that chunk of the story. While I really like the battle mechanics in One Piece Odyssey, there is one major flaw with its fights, and that's that the majority of them are exceptionally easy. Throughout the first 2/3 of Odyssey, I never died or even felt like I was remotely at risk of dying, and I was regularly killing enemies in one hit, which made a lot of the battles completely mindless. I wasn't having to think or strategize at all, as I was able to wipe out entire groups of enemies just by spamming my party's basic attacks. The back end of Odyssey is slightly more challenging, but not because Odyssey scales its difficulty in any interesting or meaningful ways. It just starts pitting you against bosses with ridiculous amounts of health, which makes many of Odyssey's boss fights more tedious than challenging. I immediately think about the Lucci fight during the Water 7 arc. This fight is just so frustratingly long and drawn out. I had to use each party member's special attacks over a dozen times to whittle his health down to 0, and I was just bored to tears for 90% of the fight. Even in the final stretch of Odyssey, I only died twice, and both times were because I got overly cocky and tried to finish off an enemy before healing my party. Of course, there's also plenty of downtime between battles where you'll be out and about exploring Odyssey's world as the Straw Hats. Just like in combat, while exploring, you can switch between party members on the fly, and you'll need to do so regularly because each party member can interact with the world in different ways. Luffy can stretch his arm out and pull himself to grapple points, Zolo can cut through metal doors, Chopper can squeeze through crevices that the other Straw Hats can't fit into, Usopp can use his slingshot to shoot down objects that are out of reach, Sanji can sniff out cooking ingredients in the world, Nami can spot hidden bags of cash, Robin can find hidden collectible artifacts, and Frankie can build bridges that let you get to new areas. Odyssey's open world offers a myriad of optional activities to partake in. There's a plethora of side missions, bounty hunting missions where you'll track down dangerous criminals, and my personal favourite, frayed memories. When you find one of these locations, you'll jump into a jumbled memory with a handful of party members, and you have to figure out what NPC you need to help to fix the memory. Completing these missions deepens the bonds between the Straw Hats and gives them access to powerful bond attacks that let them combine their special techniques into one giant overpowered attack. As you explore, you'll regularly stumble across locations that let you set up camp. At a camp, you can have Sanji cook meals that offer a whole range of benefits, get Usopp to craft trick balls that can be used to weaken enemies in battle, or ask Robin to fuse your accessories into new, more powerful accessories. When the Straw Hats depart a camp, they'll throw a party, which aside from showing you a charming cutscene of the Straw Hats hanging out, also restores their health and increases their XP gain and critical hit chance in the next handful of battles. Unfortunately, all of my biggest problems with Odyssey also arise when you're exploring the world, or at least trying to explore it. traversal often feels a bit stiff. There's just no sense of momentum to the movement, and Luffy's grappling ability is a great example of this. Where grappling should make traversal feel more fluid, it actually does the opposite. As to grapple, you'll have to stop running, clumsily look to a grapple point from a first-person view, and then pull yourself to it. Overall, there are just a lot of aspects of Odyssey's design that feel extremely dated. Perhaps the most egregious example of this is One Piece Odyssey's complete lack of autosave, a pretty inexcusable omission for a game released in 2023. You also can't just save in a menu, you have to physically go to a save point. So if you miss a save point and die, or your game crashes, you're just going to be shit out of luck. Odyssey is also bogged down by tedious environmental puzzles that feel like a greatest hits of the dull puzzles you'd find in PS2 licensed games. So you can expect to be stuck wasting plenty of time turning off electrical currents to depower shields, bouncing lasers off of mirrors, and rotating cranes so they're positioned in a way that Luffy can grapple between them. There's also an absurd amount of backtracking in Odyssey, with one section near the end forcing you to revisit all prior Memoria locations for what amounts to a dull fetch quest. This just isn't how games are designed anymore. But Odyssey's most damning issue is just how restrictive it is. Odyssey's world is made up of countless big maps, but the game is aggressively linear, and whenever you so much as take a step off the beaten path before Odyssey wants you to, it'll turn you right back around. Why even drop me into these awesome looking locations if you're just going to punish me for trying to appreciate them? Exploration is one of the great joys of playing an RPG, and I'm used to modern RPGs giving me a lot more breathing room than Odyssey does. I really didn't feel like I was truly free to explore until I'd finished Odyssey's story, and by then I'd lost the drive to explore its world, which is such a disappointing feeling to leave a game with, especially one based on One Piece, a series built upon a sense of adventure and wonder. In fact, Odyssey is just too hand-holdy all around. You'll be several hours into Odyssey before it stops interrupting you with intrusive text boxes explaining every little thing in the game as if you've never played a video game before. While my experience with Odyssey was largely bug-free, the camera did completely break on me a couple of times when I was going through crawl spaces with Chopper. It seems like the camera doesn't know what to do in these segments, and sometimes it would just start spinning back and forth, which was very disorientating. One final issue that's a very small nitpick, and probably won't annoy others as much as it did me, is that Odyssey's in-game clock keeps counting if you put your PS5 in rest mode. It took me about 35 hours to finish Odyssey, but because I'd been leaving my console in rest mode, my save file has a playtime of over 200 hours. I know this is super nitpicky, but this is something that drives me absolutely nuts in games. While it's not a graphical showpiece by any means, One Piece Odyssey does look good, thanks to its great art style, which honestly helped carry the game for me when its problems started to rear their ugly heads. Odyssey's highly stylized visuals are very reminiscent of Dragon Quest XI to me. In fact, there are honestly moments where if you'd just shown me a screenshot of Odyssey and told me it was a Dragon Quest mod, I would have believed you. Odyssey's sound design is also pretty good, and there are some catchy tunes in its soundtrack. I especially like the main theme that plays throughout the game. It has a fun, bouncy vibe that plays into the sense of adventure that fuels the One Piece series. Though the complete lack of an English dub is definitely a shame, as at this point, the English voice cast for One Piece have become incredibly iconic, so I'm sure they'll be missed by countless Odyssey players. While One Piece Odyssey is by no means a bad game, it is a game filled with missed opportunities. Not once did I ever feel truly surprised playing Odyssey. The gameplay works how you'd expect, the story plays out in a predictable fashion, and its open world feels by the numbers. This is a game that plays it entirely safe and takes no risks whatsoever. If you're craving a big anime adventure in video game form, I'd still easily recommend Dragon Ball Z Kakarot or the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games over Odyssey. But even with that said, there is fun to be had with One Piece Odyssey. While it's not all that original, Odyssey's battle system is still fun, and its art style is able to breathe new life into familiar One Piece locations. If you're a fan of One Piece and JRPGs, Odyssey is still worth a look, though you're probably better off waiting for a steep price drop. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. You can also find countless other videos on my channel, including my recent videos on my favourite games of 2022 and my most anticipated games of 2023. And be sure to stay tuned for my upcoming review of Hi-Fi Rush.